What is up, guys? Alex from ANAK here. Welcome back to another video where I try and help you better understand music from an audio engineering and production perspective. Now, this one I'm very excited for. We're going to be doing a review of So-Called Life by 3 Days Grace. And if you've been following me for a while, you know that 3 Days Grace holds a very special place in my heart. One, I've been listening to them since their very first record, I Hate Everything About You and Drown. That record really shaped me as a music consumer and got me into rock and roll and into heavier music. And it always has a place in my heart. And then in 2015, I actually had the opportunity to work with them, and I did a lot of work on their record Human, and then I subsequently also engineered their single for You Don't Get Me High Anymore, which was a cover of Phantogram. And since then, I've worked with them on and off, and it's just so cool to see them still succeeding beyond comprehension and just see them putting out amazing music. And frankly, this single to me is one of their best sounding ones yet, but we'll get into that. So this is a bit of a celebratory review and a congratulations to the boys, as this is their 16th #1 single in the active rock US charts. But I really wanted to do this review and crack open the song a little bit and look at it a bit more in depth, because I really feel that this is an amazing song. It's almost a masterclass in writing and in production. It's just a great mix, a great production overall, and they've really found their groove. And it's just an absolute banger of a song. So I really wanted to give it some extra recognition from an audio engineering and production perspective. I did have a bit of an early preview of the song before it came out, and I'm really was excited even then to be able to bring this out to you guys. So let's dive into it. Now, first off, this song is just a overly heavy song. They go back to, I would call it their roots, with some really good guitar riffs and really good guitar work, a big strong vocal, and huge drums. It's just overall a really driving, heavy tune. Now, they tend to do this with the first singles off of their records, especially more recently. When you look at the record Human, the first singles off of that one were Painkiller and I Am Machine, both, again, massively heavy, riffy songs. And they've done this over the years where the strongest, biggest riffs on the record are the lead singles. I mean, not to say that the rest of the record doesn't have riffs on it, but they like to make an impact with the first single and just come out of the gate really, really heavy and get you pumped up for the record. And they've done that once again. I'm definitely very excited for the Explosions record. Now, for the single and this record, they went back to producer Howard Benson, who did their second record, 1X, their third record, Life Starts Now, as well as some work on Outsider. Now, Neil and Howard have actually joined forces recently, and they are a production duo with their Judge and Jury Records, the record company and production team that they have going on. So they're doing a lot of stuff together, and Neil is a great producer in his own right, and he's actually got a very heavy hand in the production of this record as well as more recent records. He's been getting more and more into the production side of things, which is really cool to hear. The mix is absolutely phenomenal and really well done. Overall, I think this is honestly one of their best sounding mixes ever, frankly. I really enjoy the mix. The mix sounds huge. The guitars are massive. The vocals are powerful, and the drums just hold the whole thing down and are super, super big. So mix-wise, I think it's definitely some of their best sounding work. Production-wise, that's just bar none, absolutely stellar. Now, they're great songwriters. They always have been, and their songs are really well crafted, and this is no exception. And the production just adds a whole other level to it without too many trickery things going on. It's just a solid, good rock song. Looking at the sections of the song and the way that the arrangement happens through the song, there's so much happening. No section gets boring, no part repeats too many times, but yet it repeats enough that it gets caught in your head. They're very catchy melodies and hooks and riffs, and they're just littered in there, but they're emphasized in different ways with the drums and the bass and the guitars and just the different elements and the way that they're written and played together, the arrangement of the parts in the songs, that they're hooky and get stuck in your head. The drums emphasize certain parts of the riff to make that even more memorable. The way the vocals are crafted, sometimes the vocals will repeat something, but the track will change underneath. And then when the track stays the same, the vocals change. This is a way of making every section different and every section still be interesting, and it feels like it never repeats, but yet it feels like it repeats enough that you remember. To me, this song is a masterclass in great rock writing, and especially when you look at the overall progression of the song. The way that the choruses build and the way that the sections build and the verses build. Now, one of the things that I think is frankly underrated and most people don't even notice because it fits so well is the way that the last chorus is developed. Now, the choruses throughout most of the song have kind of a chuggy riff, a chunky riff with a lot of rhythmic element to them, and they're heavy, they're big. The vocal line on top is very memorable, the way that the guitars chunk along and add that rhythmic element to them with the drums. Then at the last chorus, they open up the chords, the guitars go to big chords, the drums open up and go to full cymbals the whole time, the vocal melody just soars over top, and it feels natural, but they've taken a big chorus that most bands would be like, yep, this is a massive, phenomenal chorus, and they've made it even bigger. They also change the chord progression. They don't change the key, but it almost sounds like they change the key. It's just higher and more impactful, and I think that's a very underrated thing that they do. Now, this is a trick they've been doing for a long time, but this one just works really well, and it's the newest one that I'm reviewing right now, so that's the one I'm talking about. But go listen to that last chorus and see how the chords change and how they just build. It just, when it lands on that last chorus, it just sounds bigger and more full and more epic than the previous choruses, even though the previous choruses were epic unto themselves. So let's look at the foundation of the track. Let's look at the drums. The drums overall, one, sonically are absolutely stellar. The kick and snare are massive. The snare has a really nice reverb on it that just, yeah, it fills up the track when it needs to, when it's a little more open, like in the verses where the guitars are a bit smaller. But the snare sound is very thick and heavy and really prominent in the mix, and I really like how they've done that. The interesting thing with the drum sounds overall, too, is that the cymbals are really low in the mix. Normally cymbals, I mean, if you listen to a real drum kit, they're the loudest thing. But if you listen to the cymbals in this mix, they're hovering where you can hear them, you can feel the energy they're creating, but they're not overtaking the mix. They're hovering in this really nice spot, and I think that's part of the magic to them. Honestly, until I really listened to them, I didn't notice what he was doing cymbal-wise. I could hear that things were happening, and it worked, but I didn't really notice exactly what he was doing. And he's doing some interesting things in that regard. Now, in all 3 Days Grace songs, the drums have always been a really nice foundation for the whole track and build nicely with the track. Neil is one of the primary songwriters of the band, so he does think of the drums in terms of the whole song in general, not just as a drummer who wants his drum parts to be great. Neil just does that naturally because he thinks of the whole tune and how it's going to progress through the song. The drum parts are always crafted in a way that they hold down the part, they hold down the beat, they keep the song driving, they emphasize certain parts when they need to, and they take their moments here and there for some really cool fills and some really unique parts, but without taking away from the song in general. And that is such an important thing. Neil's an amazing drummer, and yet he doesn't have to show it off all the time, which is an underrated skill for drummers. A lot of okay drummers try and show off way too much, but the really good drummers like Neil, they know when to sit back and when they need to step forward and really drive something home. Now, the interesting thing I really noticed with the drums is that the chorus starts out on a crashy cymbal. He's riding the cymbal, and that really brings up the energy. But then the second half of the first two choruses, he comes back down to a hat, which is kind of untypical. It's the second half of the chorus. It should grow. While the chorus doesn't lose any energy, he's able to come down to a hat. Now, the interesting part with that is he can then grow again from that chorus into the post-chorus and the parts that follow the choruses. This does change in the last chorus where he does not come down to a hat and he stays on a crashy cymbal through the whole thing. He changes cymbals and goes to a brighter cymbal to really emphasize what's going on and to lift the song ever so much more in that last part of the last chorus. This is a really interesting way of crafting the drums, but the way that they crafted the song around it also works so well. You don't feel like you lose energy in the second half of the choruses. It just feels natural, but yet the drums are, in a sense, in most people's way of crafting drums, losing energy by going to the hat. That's not the case with this, and I think that's partially to do with the mix as well. The cymbals aren't overtaking, so the big crashy cymbals aren't overtaking the mix, and then it goes to the hat and it kind of underwhelms because all the sound goes away. The mix is so well done where the cymbals and the hats, while you get the differentiating energy, it doesn't lack a whole bunch of stuff. So the way that he crafts his cymbal work in this track is really cool. There's more cymbal movement in that last chorus as well than there are in the previous choruses and in other sections. The cymbals are doing some really nice things for the overall energy and interest of the track. The other really interesting part in the drum track is that build in the first half of the second verse. That is just not a thing that most people do, but he did a build with the toms in the first half of the second verse. And then the verse kind of continues, but he's now doing a full beat in the second half of the verse. It's, again, a masterclass in how the song progresses and how the song builds. The verse comes down, but again, it builds back up almost just as fast, but then they can still build from that into the last chorus. It's really, really well crafted. Now, shifting into the bass and the guitars, there's not a lot to say here. They're just really solid. They're great riffs. The sounds are amazing. They're massive sounding guitar tones. And I know from past experience, they like to layer different things and use different layers of sounds to build different sections. If you go back to Animal I Have Become off of 1X, you can hear this really clearly to give you a better example of what I'm talking about, where the rhythm guitar starts the track and it's a big guitar sound. And then in the second half of the introduction, when the drums are starting and all that kind of stuff, the downbeats of the riff have this more high gain, buzzy sound of a rhythm sound that comes in. Now, this is a very overt example of it's the same part, but there's a new layer of guitar sound there. They build the sound of the guitars overall a little bit for different sections, and then they can come down into the verses and build it up again in the choruses, and kind of the choruses are the big, huge, epic parts that sound bigger than everything else because they have more layers of guitars. All doing the same or similar parts. It sounds like it's one guitar, but it's all different layers that build up that sound and are allowing the sound to build through the song. This is the same thing in this one. There's not a lot of secondary guitar parts. There's not a lot of different things that are happening. And frankly, they've never been that kind of a band. So while things are still there, they're very subtle. They're not overtaking. And they did stay true to that in this song. Now, when you look at the guitars and the bass, they just work really well together. The bass holds down the low end and allows the guitars to just sound thicker and bigger. And they work so well together with their parts. And even so, the bass still has that really cool little lick that is almost its hook, so to speak, in that chorus part. And it's hooky and stands out just enough that it is a memorable part, which is really cool for a bass to have. Now, if you notice, that little part happens when guitar is not happening. So you're not having the guitars and bass fighting. The guitars and bass work well together, or they do things completely separate or one at a time. They kind of leave room for each other to do their thing. And that's something that 3 Days Grace has always been very good at. They guide you through what you're listening to really, really well. Now, going along with that, the synth work. There is obviously a synth. The song starts out with a synth. And that's something that 3 Days Grace has been doing more of in recent records, is more synth work. Their first and second record didn't have as much overtly obvious synth work. Now, I know there are synths under there. They love to layer big synths in there to make the guitar sound even thicker. They like to use big synth wall sounding parts that are almost like an addition to the guitar, frankly. But they add those things in there, and big low octave chord synths in there. They're not as obvious. They're not as overtly in your face. Now, obviously the main riff of this song has a synth, and they've been doing more of this, but it works. It's not overpowering. It still has that heavy guitar sound through the whole song with a little bit of synth. Now, the thing that they do like to do with the synths is the choruses have little synth lines or upper harmonics that they add with synthesizers and with different sounds that just add that extra flavor. We call it streamers on the top of the song, which is just high notes that don't necessarily do a lot, but they just kind of are on top of the track in the choruses that lift and add that sparkle and sheen on top of the track. They're doing that in this one as well. Now, the synths that happen in the first two choruses and even in the verses aren't very obvious. Now, the last chorus, to build it up, they now have a faster synth and a little synth line. Again, it's more of that streamer. It's more of that upper harmonic element to the mix, but it's a little more obvious there, but yet it doesn't sound out of place. It just builds and adds more energy. Instead of using a tambourine or something to add some more movement to the track, they've done it with a synth line, almost like an arpeggiated type of a synth line. Now, this is something that has been changing through their records recently, where there is more songs that are way heavier with synths, and I know that this is probably going to be no exception with this record, as I know how Neil writes, so I know that that's going to be the case in some of the other songs on this record. This first started really happening and becoming very obvious in Transit of Venus. That record had a lot of more obvious synth parts and whole sections that were basically all synth, which up until that point wasn't really the way that they did things. But ever since Transit of Venus, they've done more of these kind of tracks on the record that have a heavier synth dependency. Now, this song doesn't have that. Again, they're going back to their heavier roots with this song like they typically do with their first singles. But I feel like there's going to be more and more synths in these subsequent songs and the record as a whole. But I definitely love the subtle use of synths in this song to just make things thicker, heavier, and big, frankly. And finally, the vocals. Now, I know this has been a bit of a contested thing between fans for quite a while. Obviously, it's not hurting them, as they still have #1 singles and they're doing quite well. But ever since Human, when they first got their new singer, Matt Walst, people have been kind of, it's not Adam. It's not the original singer. And while I agree with that, it's a different vocalist. It still has the 3 Days Grace energy. Now, one side note on that is that when Matt came in, a lot of people said that the writing changed and the whole thing changed and they'd started writing different songs and they lost Adam's writing. And while, yes, they did lose Adam's writing, there's still 3 more people in the band, plus the people they write with, that still make 3 Days Grace songs. And frankly, the argument that Matt completely changed the sound is untrue. Matt actually wrote on the first record. He is Brad, the bass player's little brother, and he's been around the band for a long time. He had writing credit in a few of the songs on the first record. So he's been embedded into the band for years, which is why the transition to him being singer made perfect sense. They didn't lose the 3 Days Grace sound. 3 Days Grace developed as a band and wanted to do more things. Would that have changed whether Adam left or not is not really the point. It's not because of Matt that happened. Now, that is a bit of a side note, but I just wanted to put it out there because there's a lot of misconception that the singer is the songwriter of the band, and that is not the case. The whole band is very involved in the writing, plus the producers that they work with. So they didn't lose the sound, they just developed as a band. Now, that being said, I really love Matt's performance on this song. To me, this is one of my favorite performances that Matt has ever done. It sounds really aggressive and it just works so well with his vocal, but also with the 3 Days Grace sound. Now, I love Matt's performances on other records as well, but they just didn't quite hit me the same way. This one, when I heard it, was just like, oh, this is the next level. This is Matt's sound. This is really what we've been looking for and waiting for. It's very aggressive and very him and very 3 Days Grace. It's a really good mixture, and I really feel that this is a new chapter in Matt's vocals for the band. Now, the way the melodies are crafted, he doesn't lose any power even when he goes up higher. They've crafted it really nicely that he's just got a very strong vocal sound. Overall, the tone of the vocal is very clear and right in the middle. It's a heavy-hitting vocal in the center of the mix. Now, the interesting thing is that there aren't a lot of harmonies. There are subtle things and subtle layers around him, but the whole song has one main vocal that you attach to the whole time. The layers and harmonies, while they do happen, and some, pitched down effect kind of things in certain breaks, overall, it sounds like one lead vocal. There isn't a ton of layering, there isn't a ton of effects in that regard. It's a very strong, powerful lead vocal with things to support that subtly build up the choruses or build up certain sections or build up certain lines, but they're very subtle. They just they're there, but you don't really notice them unless you really think about it. So, while I'm a fan of harmonies, I absolutely love harmonies and big counter melody harmonies and loud harmonies, I really like how they did this. And I really think that is what makes this song so special. You don't need the vocal harmonies to add to different parts. A lot of people use harmonies to add interest factor to, the second half of the verse or the chorus to make it bigger. They can get away with the writing of the song and the melodies and the strong lead vocal performance and everything else that's crafting the song without using harmonies to do that. And that just shows you how well the song is written in general. Not saying that harmonies are a bad thing or a cheap way out, but they just didn't need them, and you don't notice that they're not there. And that, to me, is well-crafted songwriting. So overall, like I said, and as I've described, I really think that this song is a masterclass in great rock writing. The way that they crafted the parts, the arrangement, the tones, the mix overall, it's just a really well-done song. And frankly, to me, one of the best-sounding 3 Days Grace songs in a long time, if not ever. The first time I heard that last chorus and the way that it builds just blew me away how that could be crafted and make a big chorus even bigger somehow. Overall, the mix of this song is just absolutely amazing, and to me, it just adds a new clarity and a new heaviness to their songs. Their previous records, to me, had a bit duller mixes and they were good mixes, and at the time they sounded amazing, but this is just the next level up when you listen to it compared to some of the older records. Whoever mixed it, which I hope to be able to put here or in the description at least, is just well done. They deserve a shout out for that. The guys absolutely crush it with the writing and the emotion that came out in this song, and it just really well done. But that is it for this video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Do you like this song better than their previous work? Not as much as their previous work? What do you like about this song or don't like about this song, frankly? Because I know we all have different opinions, and this is a safe space. Just share them, be nice about it, and have a discussion. I will see you in the next one. Until then, always be creating.